as we get closer, we'll start to try to get some commitments from our members to join in a day of service when we get some dates established. But just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. If you guys have, or you run across something that we could do as a club and try to get as many members as possible to attend a day of service to help somebody in our community, please bring those forward to myself or Danielle, and we will try to get that implemented and get the sign up set up in Club Runner and try to get some stuff going. So we just encourage you guys to think about that as we're moving forward, because we're trying that. The district has also established a relationship, and they're doing this kind of on a statewide level with 9Health. And there's a little bit of ambivalence right now because 9Health is still trying to get things set up kind of in this COVID world. They're going to start doing vaccines. They're going to be looking for volunteers to help with that process, along with their normal 9Health clinics and fairs that they're doing. That's going to be probably later, maybe in the spring is when it sounds like when that's going to probably start to launch. So kind of keep your eyes and ears open for potential volunteer opportunities to help out with that, if that's an area of interest for you. They're looking at ways to keep people safe as we navigate the current COVID environment. So just kind of keep that in mind as well. All right. All right. I'm going to jump to anything else anybody wants to share, or anything that's come up. How's Germany, Annie?
Well, Germany is all right. We have some restrictions right now because we can't go out. Restaurants are closed, and we have to wear masks in stores and schools online. Many people are in home office, and yeah, nothing's going on.
Sounds similar to everywhere else. Yep.
Yeah. Are you getting vaccines in Germany?
Yes. People over 70, I think, are right now. It's their turn. And then people that work in the, medical area, they get them also. And then later, it's our turn.
Yeah.
All right. John or Sheila, would you like to introduce our speaker for today?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I think many of you probably are very familiar with Ryan Warner, his voice. He's the senior host of Colorado Matters, the flagship daily program of Colorado Public Radio. And he is heard all over the state and really speaks with people from all walks of life with in-depth reporting. Politicians, scientists, artists, activists, kind of you name it, on a wide variety of topics. He's maybe best known or well known for his interviews with Colorado's governors, which he's done over a span of 4 administrations. And during his tenure with Colorado Matters, Ryan has the distinction of being recognized as the best of public radio talk show in the country. So we're really lucky to have him here in Colorado, and lucky to have him joining us here today. And he has some background with Rotary too. So with that, I'll turn it over so he can take full use of the time we have for him today.
Sheila, thank you so much. Can everyone hear me? That's sort of that and "you're muted" are the 2 refrains of this pandemic. But I adore Rotary. I was a Rotary exchange student in high school. I spent a year in the Alps in France, in a town called Chambéry. And my home club was in Palm Desert, California, which is in the Palm Springs, Coachella Valley region. And so Rotary really changed my life. I mean, that experience as an exchange student launched me on a course that brought me to the French embassy for a time in Washington, D.C., and just kind of undergirded my love for the language. And I have relationships with my host families that continue to this day. And this is the first time I've been to a Rotary meeting with a 5-way test. So
yeah. Do you like that fun addition of fun?
Did the Aurora Club invent that? Is that your jam? I love it. Anyway, And also, whenever I meet with Rotary, I always say thank you for getting rid of polio. I mean, I know that there are cases that come up here and there, but we owe a lot of debt and gratitude to Rotary for that. So if you aren't familiar with Colorado Public Radio, we operate 3 frequencies, 3 services. We have the news frequency on which I appear, which is Colorado Public Radio News, and I host Colorado Matters, our daily live interview program, which is airing as we speak. We were preempted because of the special coverage for the inauguration. So I'm bending the space-time continuum by speaking both to you and on the radio at this moment. And then we have Indie 102.3, which is our new music service, and which is a little cooler and hipper than I am. And then we have our classical service. And we recently grew the CPR family to include Denverite, which is an online publication that specializes in Denver and Denver news. And we have an arrangement with Colorado College to operate KRCC, which is the public radio station based in the Pikes Peak area. And that's allowing us to share our news with a lot of Southern Colorado and the Pikes Peak region. So it's a really exciting time to be at CPR. Unlike many journalistic outlets, which are shrinking and laying people off, we are growing. And we're doing that in part because of member support. I think that in these turbulent times, at a time of a pandemic and racial unrest and political division, people are hungry for good information. And so we are seeing, if you will, a counter-cyclical relationship, like people are struggling economically right now, and yet our support is growing. So it's a really a fortunate place to be in journalism right now. I'm going to share some of my favorite audio with you since I'm in an audio business. And then I'm going to just let you ask me questions about the news or about, the show or about my time in France or my cat, Bob, who is a tuxedo cat that I got during the pandemic. Okay, so I should have the ability to share this screen. I am hoping as well. Yes, share computer sound. And thank you so much. I've gotten a private message, which I should keep private, but Carolyn, Carolyn, thank you so much for your kind words about listening to the show. Okay, I'm going to share with you a program called Adobe Audition. This is how we do all of our audio. And these are waveforms, so they represent what voice looks like. And I like to think of my job as creating intimacy. That's a word that I did not invent, but that I use a lot, intimacy. My goal is to create an instant connection with someone on the radio and have them open their minds and their hearts. And one way I do that, especially if I have a very nervous guest, is to ask them about their first car. That brings them to a place of memory and nostalgia and joy. And sometimes it can get people out of their nervousness, out of their heads and more into their hearts. So if everyone will raise their hand if they can hear this, this is a mic check with, okay. Well, the audio, Sheila, will you raise your hand if you can hear what I'm about to play? Speaking of Aurora, I picked this just for you guys. This is the poet laureate of Aurora, Asetu Shango, who's a remarkable poet. And I was getting a mic check with Asetu. Let me just get a mic check from you, Asetu, and tell me about... Now, can you hear that? Can you all hear that? Oh, you can. Good. Okay, I'm going to start that over one more time here. Let me just get a mic check from you, Asetu, and tell me about your...
Hey, Ryan, can you turn it up just a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's actually coming through my mic and it should be coming through the computer. So this is what happened. By the way, I am in a hotel room. We are all working remotely in part because of the pandemic, but in part because we don't feel it's safe to be at our headquarters right now, even with a skeleton crew, because the press has been so targeted under the previous administration. However you feel about that administration, they have not been friendly to the press, and journalists have been threatened, and so we're not at the facility this week. And let me see if I can recalibrate this. Sorry, everyone. You'd think working in a radio business that I would have this down. I am going to do a quick file save and reopen this. I think that's going to help us.
I'll help you. When's it over?
I'm going to stop that sharing. Okay. Here we go.
Oh.
Okay. Yes. So I call this the sausage making of radio. Whenever we have guests that like see the hiccups, as whenever I expose the hiccups, I like to think of it as the sausage making of radio. Okay, this is slowly exporting. This is a bummer.
What does your cat does during the day? What does the cat do every day? Where is he?
While I'm away, the cat is alone, but I have a neighbor visit him. And, you know, I think he generally just makes mayhem. Okay, hold on one second. I think I've got it. Hopefully my audio settings will change and we can do this as it should be done. Okay, that didn't work. And I'm going to go to one more spot and then ditch this effort. Ah, this is why. Okay. One of the reasons I mentioned that I'm remote is that I have no engineering support. And so it's always a dangerous proposition when I have to do my own audio. Okay, this should be much clearer. Once I share the screen. Okay, you're all very patient and kind. Share screen and audio. And here we go. Setu Shango and our mic check to create a little intimacy. Let me just get a mic check from you, Setu, and tell me about your first car.
My first car was my mom's car that she paid off and then gave to me. It was a RAV4 2002 silver. I kind of miss it.
Yeah, it's so funny. I was so desperate after several years to get rid of my first car because I wanted something else. And now I think about it. I think, gosh, why didn't I keep that cool Volvo?
It's such a good car.
But I can't be a public radio host who also drives a Volvo. It's too on the nose.
Too cliche?
It's a little too cliche. Okay. A silly little piece of tape, but it just it gives you a window into what we do before we go on air so that people feel that they are at home. You know, I don't know that I necessarily want a politician that I'm grilling to feel like he or she is cozy and welcome, but you know, I want them on their toes. But for most guests, I want them, especially who haven't been on the radio before, I want them to feel that they are welcome and that they're comfortable speaking to me, because we speak to a lot of people on the show who've never been on radio. So you think of radio as being sound, and I like to think actually of radio as an opportunity to engage all the senses, especially because when you're listening, you can close your eyes and you can do a lot of imagining. So you can visualize and you can listen. And I think that one sense that is not used enough in radio is smell. So I try to ask guests about smell, not all the time, but when it makes sense. And I'll play just a little bit of audio of Patricia Cameron. This is a woman who also goes by the name The Black Packer. And she is African-American, and her goal is to get more people of color into the out of doors. And she did her first big through hike on the Continental Trail. And she invoked scent in her interview. And it's one of my favorite moments of late on the show. Let's end on a different note. What do you miss most about the trail? And we have just about a minute.
everything. I was so connected to nature and outdoors. I could smell the weather patterns. My circadian rhythm was amazing. I could smell when a new hiker was on the trail. If somebody who was a day hiker came on the trail, I could smell them a mile away because they smelled like laundry detergent perfume. um, right, compared to what we smelled like.
Yeah.
But I just miss being so connected to the world and the natural environment that I feel like I was a part of it. And coming back into a city, it feels like we've created these like encapsulated cities that are completely separate from the natural world. The one we really, is our birthright in a sense.
I just love the idea that she could smell a new hiker coming onto the trail because they smelled like laundry detergent. And so it's a nice example of how radio is really a medium that it engages all sorts of senses. And the last piece of audio I'll play before I turn this over to your questions is an example of what my job is as an interviewer, which is sometimes to slow people down in their stories. Especially if they've told their stories multiple times, people have a tendency to kind of race through. And my job as an interviewer can be to slow them down and to really draw out great details about their story so that the listener is transported. I want the listener to feel like they've been taken somewhere when they listen to an interview. So this is a conversation with PJ Abernathy. He was in prison when the pandemic began, and you may know that Governor Polis signed an executive order to allow some people in prison to get out early so that they could thin the population behind bars and hopefully stem the spread of COVID-19 in custody. PJ Abernathy got pandemic early release, and we were very eager to ask him about the day he learned he would be leaving prison early. And you'll hear him start to race through the story, and you'll hear me trying to put the brakes on to get more details.
I remember getting called down to see my case manager through the intercom in my cell, and I was actually tattooing somebody at the time.
You were tattooing someone at the time?
I was tattooing somebody at the time, and so I wash my hands, I try and get all the ink off of me, and I'm freaking out. I run down to the case manager's.
Let me pause. Let me pause this story here a little bit, just because I want to kind of draw out every detail here. What were you tattooing on your?
So at the time, I was working on my buddy on the inside of his arm. We were doing a Denver skyline piece with a big sunset in the background and a quote on the bottom of it. Came out pretty cool. So I was happy to be able to do that on him for him. He lives across the street from me in society, and we ended up knowing each other in prison. Crazy story.
And are tattoos like that legal? Is that something?
No, very, very much against the rules.
Oh, okay.
So that, I guess that's why I was freaking out. We used to cover the intercoms whenever we tattooed in prison. We would cover the intercoms so they couldn't listen to the noise going on in the cell. And so we hear a muffled, and we peel the toilet paper off the speaker, and it says, "Philip Abernathy, get down to case management right now." And, I thought I was in trouble, but it turns out I sit down and my case manager hands me some paperwork, and it says early release due to COVID-19 considerations. And I burst into tears right there. It was just the last thing I expected. I literally expected to be handed a write-up for doing something wrong. And instead I got told I was getting out of prison.
So it's just a good example of slowing people down and drawing out their best details. And I think that this is a lesson we can all learn. I mean, we all do interviewing to some extent in our daily lives when we meet somebody at a cocktail party, though that feels so pre-pandemic to say. But in business, and maybe you have the occasion to interview older parents for posterity's sake. When you do that, as much as possible, try to get all of the senses engaged. Try to slow them down and get the best details, because I find as a storyteller that the best stories live in examples and anecdotes as opposed to big generic swaths. Okay, that's all all my babbling, I'm just going to open this up to questions about any aspect of the news or audio production you'd like to know about.
Hey, so Ryan, this is Phil.
Hi, Phil.
How do you go about choosing your guests, or do they choose you? I mean, how does that work?
Well, I have a great team of producers who are on the hunt constantly for great stories. So, you know, sometimes it's just my curiosity and their curiosity asking a question about the world or about the state that leads us to a story. It's often, and this is more true now than ever before, it's often just that the news cycle drives our decisions. I mean, you know, right now, COVID and the political divide in this country and the racial unrest in this country, these are the major thrusts, themes of America right now. So that's driving a lot of our editorial decisions. And then it is also true that people reach out with cool story ideas all the time and say, you know, you should know about this neighbor of mine who, you know, raises aardvarks. And we think, well, that's a great story. We should bring them on. And so if any of you have a story idea, I'm going to just do an open chat here. If you have a story idea, and you're welcome to email me, rwarner@cpr.org. And I'll just encourage you to know that when we do a story, it's because it has a news peg. Something about it is newsy. So I'm not here to promote your business. I'm not here to say how wonderful your charity work is. Those are wonderful things, but they do need to connect to the news. So if you've done something first, biggest, if you have reached some incredible milestone in your career or in your volunteer work or something like that, these are reasons to reach out to me with a story idea.
My question is going to be a little random.
Yeah,
what
good.
What is the most memorable one-liner you can remember? I imagine you've done tons of interviews.
Oh, a one-liner.
You know, even if it's a response to a question, just curious, generally curious.
It's such a good question. That's Adam, right? Who was in my breakout room.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Hi, Adam. You know, one-liners I don't tend to hear a lot of them. Just as an interview program, things tend to be a little wordier than that. But I'm going to come up with an answer to this. I love the question. And I'm trying to think of...
I just imagine someone's quip response to, you know, a question that may have stuck, but nothing comes to mind. That's perfectly fine.
Oh, what I love are questions. My goal as an interviewer is to ask questions people haven't answered before. So you've done a nice thing by asking me this. What's coming to mind right now is our new senator, John Hickenlooper. He wrote a book before he ran for president called The Opposite of Woe. And it's spelled, I'll write it out, of woe. So he wrote a book called The Opposite of Woe, W-O-E, right? Like the opposite of sadness. And the reason he called it that is because he recounts a story of trying to come up with a slogan. And someone said, what's the opposite of woe? Like, what do we want our campaign to be about? And someone said, giddy up. The opposite of woe is giddy up. You know, like woe to horses.
Yeah, that's a good one.
There you go. Okay. So Adam, the opposite of woe is giddy up. And if you hear Hickenlooper talk about having giddy up, it means that he's happy.
That's good to know. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for making me think.
Ryan, I'm just kind of, and maybe you can't just pull one or two out of the top of your head, but
yeah,
you know, there's so many interesting characters that you've interviewed. And I'm just thinking if you have like one or two standouts, and because our state has so many incredibly interesting folks,
yes.
And you really seem to be able to dig them up.
Two come to mind when you ask that. One is that for decades, Trinidad, Colorado, which is south of Pueblo, almost near the New Mexico line, Trinidad, Colorado was the sex change capital of the world for decades because of a doctor named Stanley Biber. And he was a very confident war surgeon who happened to open a private practice in Trinidad. And one day, a man came to him and said, "Would you do my surgery?" And he didn't know what surgery this person was asking about, but he was cocky and said, "Sure, I'll do your surgery. What is it?" And he said, "I would like you to help me transition to becoming a woman." And he goes, "Okay." And at that point, only a limited number of those procedures had been done, largely, I think, out of Johns Hopkins. So he sent away for the surgical blueprints, and he started doing these surgeries in Trinidad, Colorado. Word spread in this community, and people came to him more and more to do these operations. It turned out that he was doing these in a Catholic hospital, and the Vatican caught wind of this, and he actually got papal dispensation to continue doing these surgeries in this Catholic hospital. And we were able to speak to the woman who took over his practice after he died, and to remember his legacy. I'm so fascinated by that story. This clinic is no longer based in Trinidad, but it's an amazing piece of Colorado history. And then Sheila, there is a woman named Cookie Lockhart, who is one of the world's best auctioneers. And Cookie looks like a very kind version of Cruella de Vil. And she is just remarkable at her craft. And it was very fun to hear Cookie Lockhart do her auctioneering speaking style. And I'll just never forget her. She wears the most wonderful glasses as well. So she's a sight to both behold and quite something to listen to.
I bet.
Thanks for asking.
Thank you.
So Ryan, this is Josh. Just curious, what drove you to want to be in broadcasting? What drives you every day? And then I guess lastly, what keeps you up at night after you may do a controversial interview or, speak to somebody that may not be aligned with your level of thinking or, just curious.
Yeah, in terms of how I got into this, my mom was in public relations, and she would tote me around Southern California as she dropped off press releases to television stations and radio stations. And so I got exposed to broadcasting early, and I caught the bug. And when I was a kid, all I wanted in life was to be Peter Jennings. Peter Jennings was the longtime managing editor and anchor of World News Tonight on ABC. And I thought that he just was, I thought he was the embodiment of class and grace and articulation. And so I wanted to be him. And for a while, I pursued a career in television. I was an anchor for the NBC affiliate in Sioux City, Iowa. But I had a mentor in public radio who said, you really ought to be in public radio because you will cover things more in depth. And so he courted me, and it's been a wonderful time ever since. I think I've been in public radio now for 22 years. In terms of what keeps me up at night, errors keep me up at night. In the span of a single show, we had 5 interviews on today's show. That's a lot of facts that you are transmitting to people. And I live in constant terror that something has gone over the air that is incorrect. And that terror is probably a good thing. It's what keeps us honest. Is that an answer, Josh? Yeah.
Yeah, totally get it.
And I'm a perfectionist, right? So when we discover an error and we correct it, because we do correct our mistakes, I then have to practice letting it go.
Sure.
but I don't.
Shared a little bit in that terror when I couldn't get God Bless America to play.
I know that. Yes, technical issues also terrify me. I hosted the show from my home this morning, and thank God we were tape delayed, because at exactly the moment the show would have started, a computer crashed that would have knocked us off the air. So those things also terrify me. But my list of fears is too long for this meeting, Josh. It's too long.
Just always have the one moment, please, on the standby. Yeah.
Oh, George, we should hire you to do that.
Old disc jockey. I did disc jockey and then went into PR. So I have that connection with your mother and with the broadcasting side. I was a broadcast journalist.
Oh my goodness, you have the voice I wish I had, George.
We all do. Hey, Ryan, you want a Cookie Lockhart story?
Oh, I'd love, you have a Cookie Lockhart story? Don't tell her I said she looked like a kind Cruella de Vil, please.
She'd crack up. No, Cookie's an old friend. I've been a realtor for 50 years in Colorado. And we met when we were both working in marketing land at Steamboat Lake, north of Steamboat Springs.
Yes.
My dad was a 3-star admiral in the Navy, and in '74 he retired. But right before he retired, he was living on Ford Island in the middle of Pearl Harbor. Had a little command, I think it was 100 ships and 50,000 men. And anyway, Cookie went over with a friend of hers from Steamboat. And I said, hey, look up my mom and dad, because they're hospitable characters, and she did. And Dad sent what they call the Admiral's barge over to see him, or to pick her up, I should say. And let me turn this phone off. And she and a girlfriend came over looking like $1 million, and there's 3 sailors on the barge had a real kick out of, talking to her and visiting with her. But during the process of the evening and a nice dinner and a few drinks, she showed them how she auctioned. And she was auctioning ashtrays and, cigarette lighters and crazy stuff. And Dad's 3 Filipino houseboys had never seen anything like this. And they were absolutely enthralled by this crazy, wonderful character from Steamboat. She's still alive and doing well, and I love her.
Oh, I'm so pleased to hear that she's still with us. I realized in speaking about her, I didn't know.
Yeah.
I'm going to share in the chat, just in case you'd like it. This is our interview, so you can listen to the Queen of Steamboat. Does that do it?
Yep.
Okay.
Is there any other questions? Yeah. Hey, one thing I got for you, this is Phil again, Ryan. How do you approach like controversial stuff? Because, when you listen to CPR or even NPR, you guys always sound like you're so mellow. Like there's just it almost sounds like you're flatline. How do you guys maintain that? I mean, I'm sure there's things that underneath you're probably getting fired up, but how do you maintain that composure?
Well, I think that it boils down to curiosity. If someone comes into the studio, or it's all remote now, but given the pandemic, but if someone comes in and you may personally disagree with their views and the interview is antagonistic, I just follow my curiosity. I mean, I think there are a lot of people, my friends especially, who say, I don't know how you interviewed such and such without losing your cool. But when someone sees the world differently from me, that spurs me to be more curious, not more resistant, because I want to understand why they think that. And so I think that if you stay true to your North Star of just seeking to understand, it keeps you calm.
Yeah, no, that sounds good.
Hey, Ryan. Sorry.
Hi, David.
Hey, could you maybe provide some color or comment on today's media landscape and, public radio versus other sources, and really that competition for information, in the internet age? Obviously, there's a lot of sources. I'm sure you have some thoughts you could share with us.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, our title, CPR, Colorado Public Radio, is a bit of a misnomer anymore. We are a multi-platform newsroom, so we are at CPR.org. We are on Twitter. We're on Instagram. And, you know, I got into this business and it was really just a radio business. And now when we file stories, we have to think of all of the different forms they take. So that's sort of the first way that we reach broader audiences. And there are people who will read a story at CPR.org that will never hear an interview that I do, and vice versa. In terms of the landscape, it's so true that we're kind of compartmentalized as a society now. We don't all turn on Walter Cronkite and get the news from one source. And what does that mean for us? It means that we have to try harder and harder and harder to make sure that we're not narrow casting, because the risk of that is that you just get the audience that supports you financially, and then you move on because you're sustainable. But public radio has a very express mission written into federal law to reach a broad community. And that means many people who may not know that we exist yet, who may not speak English, frankly, an audience that may not support us. And so it is incumbent upon us more than ever to reach communities that are ignorant to us, are ignorant of us. And part of that has been about expanding our reach. So the relationship with KRCC is an example of that. At this point, we are translating most of our important articles about the vaccine, especially into Spanish, to serve that community as well. And I think it's a constant job, David, to be thinking about how our audience can be more representative of Colorado as a whole and how we serve them. And, you know, the other thing is that we're battling misinformation. So I think we also have a role in media literacy and trying to distinguish truly fake news from actual news. I'm not entirely sure what our role is in that or what it looks like, but we have a responsibility there.
Thank you.
There was a comment in the chat, Ryan, that ever consider covering the logistical process for distributing the vaccine, or rather the non-process from feds, to state hospitals?
Ken, that's probably about 60% of what we're doing right now in the newsroom. We have a team that's dedicated to COVID-19 reporting. It's made up of Andrea Dukakis, John Daly, Claire Cleveland, and then an editor who used to be at the Denver Post and leads our investigative team, Chuck Murphy. And they're constantly on this beat. I'm constantly asking these questions of Governor Polis. He was just on the program last week. But I think the latter part of that question, the non-process, is what is occupying most of our time right now. We must get 20 emails a day from listeners going, how do I know when it's my turn? When is my turn? How will I know? And the answers are deeply unsatisfying. They're hugely varied because they depend on where you live and how much vaccine is in your community. And then there are a million other factors, your age and whether you're a frontline worker, et cetera. So Ken, there's an online rolling COVID-19 Q&A at CPR.org where we are answering as many of those questions as we can. Thank you for asking.
Hey, Ryan, this is Phil again. Where do you see, what's a good source for just the general community to go to find information or sources about, you know, stories that are out there that may be controversial? Have you found a place? I know, to your point, you know, it seems difficult in today's environment to really gain any clarity on, you know, stories that are considered controversial, to find out, okay, what's reality? You know, what is it that is the truth, and what is somebody's opinion on something that they presented as the truth?
Yeah, I am going to try to find this doc. So in Florida, there's a journalism think tank, and it's called the hold on, I'm thank God I have Google for this question. The Poynter Institute, pardon me. So I'm going to do, I think the Poynter Institute has, yes, here it is. I'm going to share this with you. It's called MediaWise. It's from the Poynter Institute, and it's a really good primer on how to vet the information you're getting, how to know if the source is reputable, how to know if they have cross-referenced, if they have gotten multiple confirmation of their sources, of their facts. And, you know, I go to the About section of websites a lot. If I see something that I am uncertain of, before I share it on social media, I go to the About section and I think, what's driving this news outlet? Is it a news outlet? Are there sources in the story quoted? Are there multiple sources sources quoted in the story? I mean, I think we all have a responsibility as people who share information on on social media, rather, to vet this stuff. So try that MediaWise thing at Poynter and see if that answers any of your questions. The one piece of advice I'll give, Phil, that a guest gave me recently, we know that there has been a Russian disinformation campaign. The Russians have this headquarters set up